Welcome to the Trouble with Ghana, recording for neilghana.com. Today's discussion focuses on the causes of corruption. What are the causes or the cause of corruption in Ghana? Corruption, as we know, is widespread, and as Ghanaians, that is no news to us. We've all experienced it at one point or another. We see it openly on our streets, from top to bottom. People are engaged in corruption. So, corruption is very widely spread in our society. And the question for us today is to see, why is that behavior the way it is? Why is it that our society is so wildly corrupt? Now, there's a lot of variables or theses that people have proposed that lend themselves to some measure of explanation, but I believe that none of those theories quite specifically explain the case we have in Ghana. I believe that there's a contextual difference that needs to be examined or needs to be taken into account when we study these things. And the trouble one runs into immediately in trying to pursue this question is the availability of contextual study that says that or this is a cause of corruption in Ghana in specific terms. But what we do have now is general theoretical propositions or theoretical findings that suggest one way or another what causes corruption. And some have been preferred targeted at some developing countries, and therefore those variables tend to be used widely across board. For example, low average income is one such variable that has been used over the years to explain corruption. And one can rely on that reasonably to explain corruption in Ghana. But the thing is that you begin to see the limitation of that theory the minute you go past the police officer, the teacher, or the average income earner in Ghana. When the minute you go past that person, you begin to see the shortfall of that theory because the executive director is corrupt, the minister of state is corrupt, businessman in Ghana is corrupt. So therefore, you really cannot rely on average income because such people as the minister or business executives are not people you will normally regard as making average income. So clearly, that theory falls short as a reliable explanation. And others have relied on bureaucratic corruption, or more or less the bureaucracy. That theory that corruption is a function of government officials, and therefore the definition that corruption is abuse of official power for personal ends. Now that is also relied upon to explain, but you begin to see quickly also that this falls short because when you notice that the police officer on the street is corrupt, the teacher is corrupt by way of bribing or being bribed to do one thing or another. You begin to see that it's not only the bureaucracy, but everybody else, or the teacher is corrupt, the police officer is corrupt, the taxi driver or the commercial vehicle driver is corrupt. So therefore, that theory also falls short. There have been other theories which I think some scholars have suggested cultural tendencies that lend themselves to corruption. Whilst one can see reasonable basis for that understanding or for that reasoning, I totally am opposed to cultural explanation because that has not been held to be true in any study anywhere about anything to say that culture is a reasonable explanation for why certain things happen. Now, so I will not pursue that any further, just to be able to make a point out of that. So clearly, I believe that is not the case. Cultural tendencies have nothing to do with that, though they may lend themselves. They are not the primary cause of corruption in Ghana, as I should say. But what I have found and have discussed in other forums, and to a very large extent has not been disproven because it's consistently allowed for one to explain the phenomenon in Ghana as it is and be reasonably sure that if you were to develop a policy based on that reasoning, then you have a much greater chance of success because it covers a reasonable basis, and that you hardly see any shortfall in that region. Of course, that is not to say it's an absolute explanation. What I think is a cause of corruption in Ghana is the social toleration of corruption. In other words, as a people, we have become tolerant of the behavior or corrupt behavior such that it doesn't, trigger any negative reaction when we see it. It is almost the norm in Ghana. The way business is done, if you really want to do business in Ghana, is to be corrupt. So that has become part of social thinking. It's been merged into mainstream process that you cannot get anything done without bribing. So it's no longer bad. It's not seen as a bad thing if you do it. That, oh, you are corrupt or she's corrupt. The only thing when we get to talk about corruption is really when we look at it from a bureaucratic standpoint, when we call ministers they are corrupt, but then everybody else is not corrupt. And I think that it's time, if we really want to get serious about solving the problem of corruption, then we need to understand contextually that this is the problem of corruption, that we have become so accepting of the behavior that it doesn't seem a bad thing anymore, but yet we are worried about corruption, yet we want to develop. And this is the very reason we cannot develop, because our society is thoroughly corrupt, not only at the top, but from top to bottom. We're corrupt because we accept, and the behavior is no longer anything that anybody frowns upon, is the norm. You can take many examples, and all day long you'll find a parallel that if at one point somebody decides to say no to a certain behavior, then you begin to see a change. But in our case, anything to do with corruption, there is no resistance to it. There's a widespread acceptance of that behavior. Take, for example, the police officer and a commercial driver on our roads, for example. The commercial driver knows that he needs to regularize his papers. He needs to get his roadworthy certificates in order. He needs to get his insurance and associated documents. But then he won't do it. The police officer knows that this driver would not do that. And so therefore, when he encounters that driver, the impulse is to put money in the folder or the driver's license and hand it over to the police officer. The police officer is not looking for anything. He's not trying to find anything. All he's trying to find in that padded, driver's license is money. He takes it out and give it back to him, and he goes. Now, in a case where the driver doesn't want to pay how much the police officer wants, and then negotiations ensue, and is wasting people's time in the vehicle, you hear passengers yell at a driver and say, hey, give him whatever he wants so we can go. They may probably have reason to want to be where they want to go, to be sooner than later. But then the point here is that they are condoning the behavior. It doesn't strike them as a bad deal. It doesn't strike them as a bad behavior. In other words, to say, hey, why are you doing that? Because from all intent and purposes, their life is being risked by this driver who is not driving a proper car, for example, a car that is not certified, or if were to go through the process, would not qualify to be on our roads. But they're sitting there and rather instruct or encourage the driver to pay whatever it takes to go, but not to say, why didn't you do this? We're getting off your vehicle because you didn't do this. So clearly, you see the collaboration there to corrupt, and nobody sees anything wrong with that. And that is why the behavior corrupt. Our society is corrupt. When you go to the ministries, people who come there to work, and they leave their houses telling their families we're going to work. They come there and not do any work unless you pay them money. Okay, so this is not something that you would go and pretend you don't know. You know that. When they begin to, give you attitudes, they begin to become unaccepting of whatever you're saying, begin to be reluctant to address your concerns, then you know that they want money. And the norm is to put something on the table, however way you do it. Either you promise them or you give them ahead of time, and then they're able to now begin to smile and attend to you. And that is the norm. So when you are somebody who goes there and you don't want to do that, you really cannot get anything done. So Everybody has become used to that idea, and we are all doing it. But the question is, can we sustain that? The question is, do we want corruption to stop in Ghana? And I believe that we all want corruption to stop because we all want development. Unless we stop corruption, development cannot occur in Ghana because corruption is a development imperative. For us to develop, there will be a need for us to overcome this problem of corruption. And I believe that as a society, if we understand this as the cause of corruption in Ghana and begin to work on ourselves and holding each other accountable, or individually holding ourselves accountable, we can work ourselves out of the woods and begin to advance the frontier of development by freeing the resources that are sucked away in this corrupt venture and open up a new avenue for ourselves to begin to pursue serious development for ourselves and for posterity. So clearly, in the coming days, we'll be on the streets testing this view and having people, tell us what they think is the cause of corruption in Ghana, all in the hope of trying to promote a kind of conversation that gets individually Ghanaians to examine themselves and see what we can do or they can do as individuals to contribute to a larger effort to overcome corruption in order to allow development. Thank you.